Hi everyone, this is Elena of The Witch's Box, and I'm here today with another episode of Witch Booktube. And today we're going to be talking about Wild Magical Soul by Monica Crosson. As you remember, last week I reviewed Urban Magic by Diana Rachel, and that book, along with this book, because I made reference to this book in that video, came together for our July Witches Box subscription. So those are the two books that we read for July. We were able to have both authors join us at the end of July for our live Witches Book Coven gathering. It was amazing. I had decided to review the books separately. Normally I'd come on here and I'd review both books in the bundle together, but I felt like they were both different enough that they would warrant their own video, and it just kind of gave me an excuse to talk about them a little longer. As of today, we still have a couple of these book bundles left. I'll link to that down below. When you buy the book bundle from us, so it'll be this book and the Urban Magic book, you also get a video link, like a link to the replay of that gathering that we had in July, which is what I think makes this book subscription so amazing, because to get to hang out with the authors is, to me, one of the best things ever. So all that will be linked down below. I also just felt like this book on its own needed its own space, just like the other one. Both great. I chose them both because there was this idea on the surface. You look at them and you think Wild Magical Soul, it's all about nature. And then the other one is Urban Magic, all about living in the city and doing magic in the city. They seem like they're kind of diametrically opposed, but there was enough of the common thread of connecting with the energy of the place that you're at that it made sense to have both of these books together for our reading selection for July. And also because ultimately there's always this conversation that comes up whenever we do our lives or our deep dives or whatever classes we're all doing together in smaller groups where we're talking to one another. This idea, this notion that a witch belongs in the forest, in the woods, right? We've got the trope, we've got the mythology, we've got the idea, the archetype, the notion that witches should be by trees, in nature, surrounded by all the animals. And that is amazing, and it's romantic, and it's a yes, I would love to live that way, but it's not a reality for everybody. So having both books, I thought, was a great way of dispelling the myth that one doesn't have more magic necessarily than the other, and that one doesn't have more opportunity for connection than the other. And I think that pairing these two books did that really beautifully, as well as giving very different and very unique perspectives on the energetic streams that occur and that you can work with in both areas. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and I'm going to read the bio from Monica Crosson. I'm going to read you the table of contents, and then we're going to go into the book. Monica Crosson has been a practicing witch and educator for over 30 years and is a member of Evergreen Coven. Monica is the author of The Magical Family and is a regular contributor to Llewellyn's almanacs and date books, as well as magazines such as Enchanted Living and Witchology. Monica lives in the woods near Concrete, Washington. You can visit her online at www.monicacrosson.com. We'll link to that below. And then let me just, because again, I really also love the colors of the book cover. It's really beautiful. It's Wild Magical Soul, Untame Your Spirit, and Connect to Nature's Wisdom. So the table of contents, the book is split up into 4 parts based on the elements, right? So part 1 is the forest, which is earth. Part 2 is mountain, which is air. Part 3 is desert, which is fire. And part 4 is ocean, which is water. I love that. I love that already. There's something about living in a forested environment. Like I've been now here in Idyllwild in the mountain forest town. We've got all pines and cedars and oaks, and it's all these gorgeous trees. And oftentimes it's super dry where the air element is super prominent, but the trees are so prominent. So the earth is obviously so prominent as well. And then we get these glorious rains and snows and water and the fire. We have a fire season now, as I think most of the Pacific seaboard has now an official fire season. We're in the middle of it right now, where everything just decides to burn all the way up because we're changing our climate in drastic ways. Even though for me it's easy, right, as it would be for most of us, to determine like what of my environment is representative of a particular element. What I find when I'm living in environments like this is that it all just so beautifully and seamlessly seems to blend together, so that I'm interacting with the whole of it, not just the individual elements. With that said, I love that she divided it this way, because it reminds me of the many, many, many layers that you can find in a beautiful natural environment like this. So let me read to you the table of contents, and then we'll go from there. So part 1, under forest, earth, you've got into the forest. You have Green Spirits of the Wildwood, Wisdom from Our Animal Brethren, Amongst the Bramble and the Element of Earth. Part 2, which is Mountain/Air. She's got Mountain Song, Taking Flight, The Winds of Change, Soul Dance, The Element of Air. In Part 3, which is Desert Fire, it's Desert Medicine, Sticks and Stones and All Them Bones, Lessons from the Cactus, A Warrior's Instinct Protection Magic, Here Comes the Light, Solar and Fire Magic, and The Element of Fire. And then Part 4, which is Ocean Water, you've got Conjurings from the Sea, Beautiful Shapeshifters and Other Mythical Creatures from the Sea, Moon Magic, and The Element of Water. And there's an index and a bibliography and an epilogue, which is titled Where's Your Wild? I wasn't intending to do this, but because I'm reading the table of contents, the first thing that comes up is this little section with a quote, which I'm going to read to you. The question is, where's your wild? And the answer is, I will surrender to the ancient rhythm that calls me to the threshold of the other world. Tangled within its sacred wisdom, I will find my wild. I put this bookmark here. By the way, you know, when you get book bundles from us, you get these beautiful bookmarks from us that our wonderful graphic designer created, and there are 5 total, so you can collect them all. But I put this in here because before we had our live, I like to kind of look through the book, look through all my notes, kind of see what it is that I want to pull out and ask the authors about. And one of the things that she wrote in here was one of those moments where it was like, I felt so seen. I felt so seen and so like, I do that I put the bookmarker here to kind of share it with Monica when we had her on the live, but I'm going to share it with you as well. Not that I intended to, but because it was in the book. And then really, I promise, I'm going to get into the book. This is from chapter 3, titled Wisdom from Our Animal Brethren. And this is the first line in this chapter. And when I read it, I was like, so this is what she says. As a witch, you can sometimes have a flair for the dramatic. I often visualize myself wandering through the woodland on misty evenings with a stately raven perched upon my shoulder. I mean, how many of us don't have our own mythical, fantastical, internal narrative about things that we want to do, that we feel like, how often have I envisioned myself walking through some gorgeous, mysterious forest with like a raven or an owl or a wolf at my side, like, right? Anyway, I just read that and I got such a great chuckle, like, girl, I feel you. I've got a flair for the dramatic too. And I always imagine myself in ways that I'm probably never going to share with anybody. Other than the hints that I gave you a few minutes ago. Okay, let me talk about the book. Reading this book reminded me of the experience that I had when I was reading the Sharon Blackie books. I reviewed a couple of her books here on Booktube. You can go back and catch those. And there are a couple of other authors that are similar in the sense that I felt like I was going through this beautiful love letter of a journey through nature. And the writer, Sharon Blackie, but also Monica Crosson, as well as there's a couple of other authors that are coming to mind right now that they're not coming through. I felt like it was a love letter. I felt like this was a love letter in a lot of ways. And it was a journey. It was more than just the education, right? You're reading a book to read an author's thoughts, to learn a new perspective. She's got information and hints and tricks and suggestions on spells and different transformational work that you can do involving nature and your relationship with nature. That was great. It was really wonderful. But it was more than that for me. It was like, instead of creating this sense of longing for what I don't have, it was like I had this entire gorgeous experience just with the book, all on its own. I felt the connection with the rain. I felt the connection with the different trees. I loved how all of that for her, those relationships for her and that intimacy for her is so laced with magic and whimsy and the sacred. And because all this is coming back to me now, because you know that by the time I get here, these books I read a few months ago. And part of the reason why I just don't review them in the moment and then bank them for future publication on YouTube after we've sent them out for the book subscription box is because I always want to have the influence of the time that I had with the author as part of the review. All that to say is that sometimes your girl just doesn't remember all the things, but it's coming back to me as I'm talking about it. And one of the things that I really loved is because she divided the book into the 4 sections, into the 4 elements, and looked at those relationships through those lenses. It just gave me such a deeper, sweet, almost like a homecoming feeling sensation when I read it. It was a vacation to read this book in a lot of ways. It wasn't as much about, oh, let me learn about these witchcraft techniques, as much as it is this beautiful insight into an ongoing, ever-evolving, intimate relationship with nature and the wild, and connecting to those parts, not only of nature itself, but to herself. And I just said that line, and I just realized that she wrote about this. She talks in the very beginning, in the introduction, about it's not about getting away, it's about coming home. And the idea of returning to nature is a return to ourselves, because the life force that continues to pulsate in these beautiful expressions through plants and trees and animal and soil and all the things that we experience outside in the wilderness or in natural, uncemented areas, those are the rhythms and the life pulse that are within us, right? That flow in a very specific way that is like the rule of life, the rule of nature. And so much of what we do in our modern life is to disconnect ourselves from that, and disconnect ourselves from that truth and what those implications are for our lives, right? But reading her and her experience and the way she travels through the space and the way it's so much a part of the way all of her relationships seem to be informed was really, really beautiful. And so it's an interesting thing, because can you learn from this book? Absolutely. But for me, it was more about the experience, and that being the teacher, that I felt like I was on this gorgeous journey. I was getting rained on right there with her. I was, seeing that little spirit sprite entity off in the distance. I was there and I was having this beautiful experience. It felt so nourishing to read this book. I get a lot from these books, obviously. And this might not be the thing for everybody, but beyond the fact that it was really well written and she's got a bibliography, she's got references, yes, all of that, but also it felt like a love letter. For that reason alone, I would say this is not only something really beautiful to read if you live in these natural environments, or if you long for it and it's not in your near future, this gives you this beautiful, immersive experience internally, which I think can be like a salve, right? I really enjoyed this book. I think she did a beautiful job. It was a pleasure and an honor having her join us, as always. I do recommend it. And also because in the Northern Hemisphere, at the time of this video going live, we are at the last third of the summer. If you have some time to lay around outside in the sun for no other reason other than it feels beautiful and good and nourishing, that you'd be reading a book like this just to kind of add to that overall nourishing experience, this book would get that for you. Obviously, I cannot say enough. I chose it. I chose it for our book subscription. So you know that it goes through some sort of a test. I have to really, really be into the book. I have to really, really love the book. I do recommend it. And if you want the bundle so that it's this book and the Urban Magic book, don't be upset if at the time of this going live, we're actually sold out. I'll link to all the different ways you can get this book down below. But the bonus is that if you get the book bundle from us, then you also get a link to the recording so that you can actually watch our live Witch Book Coven gathering and the talking and the questions and the authors. And that's always such a beautiful treat. It's such a wonderful thing. So we obviously love writers here at the Witch's Box. So there you go. Wild Magical Soul by Monica Crosson. It was beautiful. Monica, if you're out there, thank you for joining us and thank you for writing this book. Very lovely. If you've read it, let me know and let me know what you think down below. But also, this is what I want to know. I mentioned Sharon Blackie. I'm mentioning Monica Crosson. I'm remiss in not remembering the name of the author of The Braided Grass, which is a beautiful, beautiful book. But if you know those books and you know the flavor, the thing that I'm talking about, and you have recommendations for others, I would love to have you share that down below with me, because I just want more of books like this, even if it's not witchcraft related, but just for me and for my pleasure. I'm loving spending time with these books, and there's a very particular type of nourishment that comes along with this that I really love. Before I go, I just want to add this other thing that came to mind, which is this. The other book or the other author that has the same type of effect on me in terms of when I read the book, I get such a visceral, warm, fuzzy, deeply nourished sense, and it's different writing, right? But it's Scott Cunningham, and specifically his elemental magic books. He's got 2 or 3 that I vaguely am recollecting right now. We've read and I reviewed a couple of them. His writing is different. It's not as lyrical. It's not the same style, but his intimacy and his love of it, that relationship with nature and the elements, comes through so beautifully in the writing that I get that same type of nourishment where it's like, oh, this is such a beautiful, devotional, almost an offering of love. They feel like love letters. I don't know how to better explain it. So Scott Cunningham does it in a little bit of a different voice. I just feel so nourished. I feel like it's a long, deep drink of water or a beautiful mist on your face. Like, I can just wax poetic about these books forever. In any case, I wanted to add that just to kind of give you an extra flavor of what I'm looking for. If you know of other books like this, I would love for you to recommend them to me down below, because I get a lot from them spiritually. I just feel like it's such a beautiful, nourishing thing. So like that. Thank you for hanging out with me. I will be back next week. Take care. Bye.